In one sense, this is quite a technical talk this evening. Co-arising, emptiness, not separate. And yet it can't be disconnected from the fact that over recent weeks in this country, in the words of former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, I think always a good person to go to for sane words, we've had ordinary people outside hotels raging at ordinary people inside hotels. Those obviously being hotels where asylum seekers are being housed. So I'm not going anywhere near politics this evening, but I do want to talk about how we might approach what's happening there from a position of co-arising, from a position of the understanding of emptiness and non-separation. So last week we were talking about co-arising in the context of what happens when I'm on the cushion. A thought arises, and co-arising means, quite simply, straightforwardly, perhaps not so simply, not so straightforwardly, but thought and thinker arise together, that they cannot do otherwise, because otherwise you would have a separate thought and a separate thinker, and that's the whole point about not separate. Same goes for experience, the feeling of the weight of this body pushing into the cushion, and the experience and the experiencer arise together, this sense of me. The feeler and the feeling. I feel the feels. What feels the feels is the feeler. And this is non-separation, this is co-arising, this is relationship. And it's the embodied understanding of this, which is what we're moving towards in our Zazen. Not as a thing to imagine, not as a thing to pretend, but as the lived experience. But out of this co-arising, this thought and thinker arising together, there's always the temptation to imagine that the thinker pre-exists the thought, that the thinker continues after the thought has faded, ceased. And it's in this sense that, it's an image I've used before. We tend to imagine existence rather like we're a set of billiard balls, snooker balls, pool balls, whatever, on a green baize table. We're just sat there in our own little world, persisting. We're a solid ball after all. We feel pretty solid and substantial. And then, whack, the cue comes along, knocks us for six. We spin off. Maybe we disappear into the side pocket. Maybe we collide with another ball. It's a force coming from outside. It's nothing to do with me. It's entirely separate. And if billiard balls could think, you could understand them going, look, I want to decide when I move. I want to decide what direction I'm going in. This is so unfair. Here I am, existing, and suddenly life as it is, gathers me up and pushes me off in an entirely separate direction. I want to be in control. Or of course we collapse into resignation. There's no point. I have no agency. I have no control. I'm just a billiard ball being knocked around the table. And those seem to be our two possible decisions. Life is something which knocks us around. And we can try and gain control of it, or we can just give up. Now we can contrast this with an image of Joko Beck's, which I like, we come back to from time to time, is the image of the whirlpool. Little eddy, might be a substantial whirlpool, might be a little eddy close to the bank of the river. Water's coming down and it moves around. Maybe a branch passes through, maybe there's more water, it swells, maybe disappears altogether. It's not separate. Not only is it not separate from the water of the river, after all it's made of river, it's made of water, it's not separate from all those different player forces which are part of what we think of as the river. So that's all the life in the river. The river bed itself, the banks, the vegetation, the rain that comes down and is fed to, the water coming down from the headwaters, the condition of the soil, everything. Ultimately, take it out, zoom out the whole world, but certainly, the ecosystem. And this whirlpool is not separate from that. There's no entirely independent force affecting it. It's part of the life of the river. It swells, it arises, it ceases. A codependent arising is like that. Things arise together, always together. And they cease, impermanence, moving on, moving on, moving on. And that is the nature of self. But we like to imagine that we're more like the billiard ball, that we persist moving through. The thing is, the closer to the whirlpool I experience myself as, the more I can experience the world as like me, but not me. Different from me, but not separate from me. Relative, relational. And this is really important when we come to that particular aspect of world, which is not generalised, but quite specific. You, the other, self and other. Just as thought and thinker co-arise, self and other co-arise. I can't be a self without another to be a self in relation to. If I experience another, I can't experience another as other without experiencing self as self, co-arising. So the question is, how do we see this relationship? And again, in our culture, and to an extent, we tend to read this into Buddhism, that there's another pair, which obviously, like everything else, co-arise. Selfish and selfless. I'm bringing a kind of moral sense to it. Say selfish, bad. That relates to the whole Christian tradition. Selfless, good. And yet both of these are fantasies. They're both as if we were separate. Selfish doesn't work because I'm imagining myself as a separate self, so I'm feeding this fantasy all the time. I'll never relate, I'll never be not separate with the other. If I'm just mine, I'm never here, me. But equally, selfless works up to a point. Doesn't work beyond that point because I'm still imagining I'm separate, and maybe I think I'm saving the world out there. Or maybe I think I'm not worth anything, or it doesn't really matter what. I'm feeding a fantasy of selflessness. Whereas the reality is always simply not separate. Separation, or the fantasy of separation, the fantasy of me and world, or me and you, as being not connected, as existing entirely independently, not being in relationship permanently, whether or not we choose to recognize that relationship, it leads to problems. And the specific aspect of this problem is othering. And we're all used to othering as an idea, that which we reject, that which we push away. But we can think about this othering in the specific context of co-arising. Because in reality, self and other co-arise. And yet the whole point of othering is treating us as unconnected, as simply different, as simply other. In doing that, as I say, what I'm doing is feeding fantasies of separation, the fantasy of the separate self, the fantasy of the separate other. And what I'm doing then is I'm creating identities. Me, everything which I think I am, and you, everything which I think you are. Now if those fantasies are mutually compatible, so far so good. But if they're not, what about the identity which I'm creating for me? And there's a very specific problem here, because as soon as I create an identity, I'm saying I am this and I am not that. And when you are that and you are not this, and we tend to take all that we don't want with us, all of the, well, I'm this, but I'm not that. What do we naturally do? We take that and we offer it to the other, which we are othering. That is what you are. Now, often it's the good stuff that I keep for myself. I am this cool dude. And you are, well, you're whatever you are. But of course, identity exists along so many different axes. I am a father. I am a husband. I am a man. I am the son. I am British. All of these identities, they're, well, go back to basic Zen. They're empty. So I fill them up. What am I going to put in to each of these fantasies? And of course that's going to depend on so many things. But it's going to proceed along, to an extent, predictable lines, obviously. We'll sort of know what a father is. We'll sort of know what being English is. The specifics of it, though, are always, well, these identities are never fixed. They're always fluid to a degree. What are we going to include? What am I including in being a father or being English? What are you going to include? And so what are you going to exclude? What are you going to push out of there? I am this. You are that. Identity is not difference. Difference is simply a variation from each other. That can be something to celebrate. If you weren't different from me, then there would be nobody else to relate to. You have to be different from me. And we can celebrate that. We can enjoy it. We can meet. You're different from me, but we are not separate. You're like me, but you're not me. Or we can cease to recognize ourselves when we cease to recognize the other as a real other, and we want to pin them down within an identity. So what am I giving to you? What is the that which you are? Well, it's always going to be an element of what I fear in myself, what I choose to reject from myself. The fantasy of me, to support the fantasy of me, to support this imaginary identity, because I can't, unless I recognise you, and this is the whole point, co-arising, self and other together. Unless I recognise you, truly recognise you, I'm not recognising me. This is the vital point. So let's take this out. Let's take this out on the street for a couple of minutes. We're not going in many of the directions that we could, but we're remembering back to more or less this time last year. Riots or violent action in 27 British cities. Over 1,800 arrests. Mosques attacked, businesses attacked, occasionally roadblocks set up in the street, demanding to know the ethnic identity of whoever's driving past. What's going on here? Well, obviously it was a reaction to, I hesitate to call a response to, the murder of 3 young girls in Southport. And the idea that somebody had to be held responsible for this. And in actual fact, the perpetrator was known. That was never an issue. But somebody had to be held collectively responsible for this. How could this happen in our community? It must be a force from outside. Where can we look? We look to the other. We look to the different. We look to whoever what we're being told, the information we're being fed, our traditional prejudices, our cultural prejudices and predispositions tell us is the other. And if we go out in the streets draped with the St. George's flag, the white red cross on the white ground, we may or may not consciously remember that this is the Crusaders' flag. Christians killing Muslims. Yes. It's strange having a flag like this. And in fact, I used to love to dress up as a crusader when I was, 8 or whatever. It was the best adventure ever. And yet. So we create these identities. And the specifics of it being 3 young girls being killed is very important because it gives a focus. It gives a sense of what we identify, if we're white British, as our women and girls. And we tend to equate women and children anyway. Our women and girls, unsafe, because women are vulnerable, we know that. And so we must protect them. We must protect them from this evil other. And in the recent protests, there have been pink protests. So that's women wearing Barbie pink to show that they are women and they're a traditional fantasy of what a woman is and weak and vulnerable and that they need protecting from the other. Now we know, as far as any statistics are available, that if anything, it is in fact less likely that you will be, if you are a woman, attacked by, this is rates, not absolute numbers obviously, because that you are less likely to be attacked by a non-white Briton than you are to be attacked by a white Briton. We know that for a fact. And the really interesting statistic in here, which is the whole point of this demonstration, is that we know of those people charged with offences under the riots last year, 4 out of 10 of them had already been reported to the police for violence against women and girls. In some of the police areas where this was an issue, it was actually 7 out of 10 of the rioters charged had already been reported to the police for violence against violence against intimate partners, women and girls. So this is what we do. We take our own stuff, the stuff we do not want to admit about ourselves, and we offer it to the other. And then we attack the other. And these are men offering violence towards others as a reaction to their own crimes. This is exactly how bizarre human beings are. And this is dreadful. This is appalling. But of course, as always, there is a sense in which this is us, because we're all of us other. We're all of us other along the lines of our own stuff. It's not often as dramatic as that. It's not often as catastrophic as that. And we need to find, obviously, much better ways as a society of addressing these issues. Seriously better ways other than just wishing well. But that this relates exactly to what we all experience on the cushion in our own co-arising. What identity am I adopting in this moment? And what identity co-arises with that for you, whoever you is? Now, if you are the kind of person who would offer your intimate partner violence, you're probably not watching this. And yet we other each other, we other our partners, we other our children, we other our parents, we other our work colleagues. As I say, mainly, significantly in pretty minor ways. But still real, it's the same process, whether the consequences are itchy or whether they're catastrophic. Obviously, sitting zazen on my own cushion, talking with my family over the dinner table, talking to my parents on the phone, whatever, I have a chance to begin to notice this. And our practice is always simply awareness. Come back to the simple awareness. How does my selfing and my othering work? This is not about calling us bad or wrong, because this is part of the process of relationship itself, where relationship stutters, stumbles, fails. do we catch it? And we become related, connected. We recognise each other actually as the infinite possibility which we all are. And we proceed joyfully because the recognition, the relationship is always potentially joyful. It's life itself. And there will always be moments of othering. How can we guard our moments of othering and the others that we care for? And as we are not separate with every other being, how can we not care about? How can we not attempt to care for in the limited way that any of us are able to? Each other being, every other being. Can we offer them our recognition? Can we offer them at some level, at least the possibility of relationship? Can we do that? Because only by offering that to the other can we ever really come to recognise ourselves.